Hey, good morning. It's Monday. It's the 2nd of October, and we're getting started with the fourth quarter of the year. Hang on just a second. You know, this always happens when you do stuff live. You get things that aren't the way you want them to be. Okay. I have two monitors here, and I've mentioned this before. I'm over here with a delay, and I'm over here live, and it gets me confused because the brain doesn't work as well as it probably should. Anyway, it's the 2nd of October, and I'm Mike Wright with TaxRight, the sponsor of the Red Shoe Business Club. And today we're going to talk about doing the right thing versus, doing things versus doing the right thing. First thing I want to point out is it's critical for any business that you take action. You need to be doing something. You need to be acting in a way that will make your business grow and do better. But even doing the wrong thing because you're doing something is better than doing nothing. We've all heard the stories, and maybe we're all guilty. In fact, I know I'm guilty from time to time, but certainly not all the time, of making the mistake of planning, trying to do things right, make sure everything's ready to go before I jump in and do something. But advisor after advisor and experience after experience tells me that I'm better off to jump in and do something and see how it works out before instead of doing nothing and trying to plan the way through it. Those of you that have been watching these daily broadcasts for the last 2 weeks know that's exactly how we started out. The first 2 or 3 were really rough, like this is really polished and good. But my point is, you've seen the development. The important thing is that I started doing something. I started talking to people about things that needed to be done. And that's what you want to be doing. You want to be taking action, even if it's wrong. So doing things is really important. However, you have to have some way of deciding whether or not you're doing the right thing. And of course, since we're business people, the right thing is the thing that gives us more business. It's the thing that provides us with more customers. It's the thing that provides us with more money. It's the thing that provides us with more opportunities to help. And so how do we accomplish that? Well, one of the first things that you might consider is to experiment. I just finished reading a book called Alien Thinking. I should have looked up the name of the author. I didn't. Alien Thinking. But he brings up the idea of trying things, of doing different things, seeing what will work and what doesn't. And that's very important. Typically, when I talk to new business owners, I try to get them to use the lean startup approach. And the lean startup approach is this. You get an idea, you try it, you see how your customers react, and you modify things accordingly. Well, that's a very important idea. It's a very important concept. It is, in fact, experimenting. And that's how the lean startup teaches you to do it. But the author of the book Alien Thinking made this point. Typically, when we try those things, all we ever try are the things that we've already decided will work. And it's when we try things that we're not sure whether they'll work, in fact, when we try things that we don't think will work, that we then find truly new developments, new ideas that can carry us forward. That's the alien thinking part of that concept. But what does that mean? Well, what it means is that if you sit down, even if you brainstorm with some other people, if you sit down and you come up with 2 or 3 ideas, generally at the end of the meeting, you pick the best 2 ideas and you test them out. That oftentimes is called A/B testing. But you don't even consider C and D and E. And so one of the things that you can do when you're trying to find out what the right thing is what can you do more? What can you do different? Where can you go outside? That's the thing about thinking outside the box. Well, in order to think outside the box, you have to know where the box is to begin with. And so perhaps as a way to start, your A/B thinking is where you want to go, but you need to be prepared and you need to be willing to see what kinds of responses you get if you do get outside the box. And one of the things that happens in experiments is that you oftentimes get results that you don't expect. Most people have heard the story about the discovery of penicillin. Came about because of a failed experiment. That's an important thing to remember when you're thinking about the kinds of things that you need to do. Remember, we're talking about doing the right thing. So oftentimes when you're doing these kinds of things and you get a result you don't expect, then you begin to consider, gee, is that unexpected result actually the thing that we should be pursuing? And so the third thing about that to try the unexpected. By the time we get through with this series, I'm going to be an expert at writing sideways. Try the unexpected. Expand your experimental program to include something that you didn't anticipate coming about. You may well find that that is the thing that you want to do, that is the new thing. The universe has opened up a new opportunity for you that you never even considered before. We had a discussion about that in my networking meeting this morning. So that's an important thing to remember. So you need to do something, but you need to be sure that you're doing the right thing. I also want to mention very briefly the one thing. The one thing is talked about in a book by that title, and what it boils down to is this concept, that what you want to do is the one thing that if you do it, it will either make the things that follow easier or perhaps eliminate them altogether. Now, you may see a certain amount of confusion here because your ability to anticipate the results of the one thing when you decide to do it may be something else that will bind you to only thinking about the normal responses. Don't let the concept of the one thing block you out from taking advantage of the unexpected. Because you may well find that the unexpected thing is in fact the one thing that will make everything that follows easier or eliminate the other steps altogether. Let me talk philosophically here just a minute or so. If you have started your business coming out of employment only, then you may well have difficulty understanding what you should do next. And your experience as an employee will tell you how that business ran. Your experience in decision making may well have only been to say, if the boss says to do it, then it must be right. But you'll remember a couple of times I've mentioned the fact that when you're being entrepreneurial, you're doing so because you're taking something that you know how to do and trying ideas of your own to make it better. And that's the thing that oftentimes will cause a new entrepreneur to be blocked, to have difficulty moving ahead, have difficulty to find the way to take action, any action, quite frankly, because they are so tied into the experience that they've had in the past. One of the features of entrepreneurship is the ability to have a vision and to see that vision as what you're trying to do rather than seeing things as the 1, 2, 3 procedures. Don't get me wrong, having 1, 2, 3 procedures are very important. But when you're developing and implementing your vision, sometimes the 1, 2, 3 procedures are a blockage rather than a goal or something that moves you ahead. Don't get confused by this. because it seems that I'm saying two different things. On the one hand, I'm telling you to do something even if it's wrong, but on the other hand, I'm telling you to only do the right thing. What I hope you see as the bridge there is the idea that you have to try things. You have to be willing to fail. In other writings that I've done, I often talk about failure and how failure is the most important teacher that any business owner has. It can be expensive, and sometimes the failures can compound until the business is destroyed. We certainly don't want to get to that point. But if you aren't willing to fail, if you aren't willing to try something and learn from the failure that it creates, then you're going to have difficulty moving ahead as well. This is one of the most difficult pieces of the entrepreneurial vision, because unless you have a blueprint that you're unwilling to deviate from, which is what an employee does, they do what their boss tells them. Unless you, even if you have a franchise set up, which can provide you with excellent guidance in the way you run your business, but it can't be the guidance that you adhere to regardless of the results and the circumstances that happen in your particular activity. Or if you're making this up as you go along, as most entrepreneurs are, then you have to be able to sit down and decide what it is that will do the right thing for your business. And so that's why we talk about these issues. The idea of taking action, even if it's wrong, to experiment with things, to try something new, and to try to bring on, to embrace the unexpected. And then you can have some good judgment and some good experience in order to be able to decide what the one thing is that applies to your business on a going forward basis. Hey, look, if business was easy, then everybody would do it. But this is something you have to spend some mental effort to think about. What I suggest you do is you write down what you did last week. You write down the things that were successful, and by successful, I mean the things that moved you forward, the things that made you more money, the things that got you more clients. Write those things down and see what it was that you did to make those happen. Equally important is to write down the things that you did that failed, and then you need to analyze why they failed. What went wrong? What could I do different? Now look, sometimes they'll go wrong simply because of circumstances. Sometimes they'll go wrong for things that are entirely outside your control. But you need to recognize the reasons that they went wrong. And if it was outside your control, then you see how you can deal with the circumstances surrounding those events that you can control so that you don't have the negative results. But remember this too, when you try something and if it doesn't work, don't just keep repeating the same ineffective action, thinking that if I just try it a little bit harder, or if I just try it a little bit more often, that things will work out. Learn from your failures, but don't repeat them unnecessarily. Good advice? It is good advice, but it sometimes is hard to take because it's not something that I can delineate for you on a checkbox. And if you check all 4 items, then you know things are going to work out right. Because people, sometimes you can check all 4 items, do everything exactly the way it needs to be done. It can happen in exactly the way that you've successfully done it in the past, and it can still go south. That's one of the wonders of the universe we live in. So I hope you find this useful. We're going to be talking about this a little bit later on this week when we talk about getting started planning for the 4th quarter of 2023. So until then, talk to you later. And once again, we're live.